Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ahead of the Curve. This week, I've got a special guest, Nick Rivero from Meptic. And Nick, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, hey, would you mind giving us a little kind of overview of, where you are, your company, where you come from, how you got to where you are, just to kind of give our viewers a little overview of kind of, where you came from.
Yeah, definitely. So, originally I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. So grew up there, went to college, funny enough to be a classical music major. And here's the funny part is when I graduated college, my degree is in multi-camera sports television. So slight deviation from classical clarinet to
just a wee bit.
Slide a little. So I got this degree in multicam television because I had some friends in the program, and I always thought video was really interesting to me, and I got into this program, and it's great because I don't like sports. So it totally worked out. And the thing that was so fascinating to me was, I'd never done live events before. I'd never done high energy, high pace things. And to go into this program where you're doing that 24/7 was just really fascinating to me. And what happened was, out of college, all my friends went to ESPN, basically, and moved up to Connecticut, did the sports thing. I was the opposite, as I basically stumbled into live production and got a job, with a production company, and basically 2 days out of college, hit the road. And 15 years later, really haven't turned back, I would say. So I really liked the pace of doing live events, just that, the immediacy, the one chance you have to get that right was just so fascinating to me, is that, you plan, you have this moment, you have this time. That was just there was always a thrill in that, in sports, you never knew the outcome. You never knew if there'd be a rain delay or something crazy would happen. It was just so interesting to me. And so it was a path I never really thought I'd be on. I thought once I got into sports production, I thought I might go into post-production, editing. I spent a lot of time studying back then, Avid, media composer, editing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so more TV based.
Exactly. Yeah. TV, edit, post-production based. And then I ended up getting this job in live production, and that stumbled me down a long road of horrible mistakes, such as concert touring. And a
common mistake, I think, that we've all kind of made.
Exactly. So I did the tour thing for many years and further. I love that. And that's, again, another thing that, never thought in a million years, looking back on life, that I'd be a roadie, getting to tour around the world. And that was such a cool period of life, that the travel, that's also a thing about me, is I grew up only ever visiting 4 states and 0 countries. And I guess by about 32 years old, I checked off all 50 states, bunch of countries. So that's what's been kind of so fun about this industry and everything, is, getting to get on the road, travel, etc. So I did the concert thing, and then catching up to today is got off the road 2014. And at that point I was living in Nashville, and then I moved down to Atlanta, where I met my wife, and her and I actually started Meptic. I say her and I, she's technically the founder and had started Meptic prior, and her background is in motion design and projection mapping. So she with half of our team went to Savannah College of Art and Design. She has her master's in motion animation, and then she went professionally into live events also, but specifically a lot of projection mapping. So she came from a world you'll know of, Pandora's Box, and doing projects on that early on, many moons ago. And so when we started Meptic, we fundamentally started in projection mapping. Is we brought Sarah's side with the creative, and then my side really became a lot of the technical and the systems and the engineering. And so we really just kind of put that together and started there, is saying, we can do large scale projection mapping. But really more than that, it became a lot more as time moved on. Is what we really found is the passion for those two key things, which is creativity and technology. That's really the two bents each of us have of our focus on the company. And, Sarah's always looking for, how can we creatively apply this and what can we do with these ideas and these technologies and how do we hone it? And my side is really like, what's next, what's going on, what's out there, and those kind of things. And so here we are many years later and have a team here based in Atlanta. And yeah.
So how many people do you have working for you now, just out of curiosity?
That's a good question. 8.
Wow, that's a pretty good size. And how long have you guys been around?
So just over 5 years. We're going into our 5th lap now.
5th lap now?
Yeah.
Fifth year?
5th year. This is the start of our 5th year. So going into year 6.
So, a lot of things have changed and a lot of things have evolved, definitely, even in the course of the last 6 years. And it would be really interesting to take the take. I mean, we've seen a lot of transition now from, pre-rendered assets and pre-rendered files or video files. I use assets kind of loosely because it's kind of it falls across all kinds of different mediums. But we're starting to see rapid changes, I would say, into real-time technologies. I know that in the media server world, we used real-time, I would say, in a kind of loosey-goosey kind of fashion in the past, but I think we're starting to see a lot more evolution coming our way, especially with the introduction to gaming engines and other tools like Notch, for example, and Touch Designer. But what are your general thoughts about real-time technologies in the business that you're in and within MEPTIC?
Yeah, so lots of thoughts there. Is the idea of doing things in real time came about actually pretty early when I was out of college. And the way that whole kind of path started for us was the guys I worked with at the time had this silly, dumb, crazy idea. This is 2007, maybe. And the idea, like, this is literally the idea that kind of started the thought of real time anything for me. Was the LD on this tour we're on wanted to use at the time the game Guitar Hero, the controller, and he wanted to control a Hog IPC. That we had these 2 Hog IPCs on tour, and he was like, there has to be a way I can control this console with this game controller. And so the two of us sitting there, afternoons on tour and all this stuff was like, okay, there has to be this idea that you can like connect these things together. You can do this thing, whatever. And that stumbled us into this world of a program called Chords Composer that I'm sure, yes, you're very familiar. And probably a lot of people have. Yeah,
I'm definitely I've been familiar with it. I would be actually really interested to see if any of the viewers are familiar with it. So if you guys are watching, post away in the comments. That'd be great to hear.
Yeah, it was like such an early thing. Is that Quartz was this, like, I kind of call it like the pre-Notch. It was like the very first kind of step in this graphic-based node tool. And the best thing was it was free. So like at the time, it was this part of like the Mac OS developer tools. Basically, it was a Mac only thing. And it was just this silly little like app. And we used to just like build, a ton of stuff. And that was the first thing we did. It was we used it not in a graphical sense, but we used it to convert this, game controller to MIDI to trigger this console. And we ended up doing it. And that started us on this silly road of like, okay, so what else can we do with this? And that kind of started moving forward. And so we did some early concert tours I did in like 2009, 10. We would actually build these hacky things that were like, we'd give members of the band Nintendo Wiimotes, controllers and things.
Yeah.
We'd connect those in, and then we'd like overlay particle systems onto iMag. It wasn't anything of the level we're doing now, but it was always this like super hacky thing that like you hoped every night would still work. Like, some of these things were it was like super hacky. It was super interesting. And so that was like the first big forays. We would do these things on like tours. We would do these things randomly. And then we kind of started realizing that you could do things professionally with it. And one of the bigger projects we did is we did a big conference here in Atlanta where we made this huge like social media visualizer in like, I think 2010 or 2011, all in Quartz Composer. And it was kind of like, okay, like we're actually doing, it used to be just silly things and we started doing projects in it. So we kind of had this like, we knew that these things existed, but at the time it was all really kind of piecemeal. It was like you had this tool here, you had that tool. And especially as you probably know, like a lot of the VJ community was really big on this kind of like the open source, what tools, how you could hack the tools together. And so that was like a lot of where we were like kind of looking for this stuff is, trying to find solutions and ideas and all of that stuff. And so all that to say is when we started Meptic, like, I knew all of this stuff was possible, but it was kind of like a matter now of like that next level. It's like, how do you actually do things with these tools instead of just, doing random stuff, I guess. But like, yeah, so we knew that real time was possible. What I don't think we knew at the time was that real time would be like the defining thing that we do. I mean, it's really every project this year alone, and probably in the last 8 to 10 months, we haven't done anything in a rendered workflow at this point anymore. Every single project we do, from experiential to stage visuals to corporate, has been entirely real time. And so I don't think 10 years ago I would have ever imagined, you're doing entire shows where all the visuals are completely real time. All of the lobby experiences are completely real time. That never crossed my mind back then. And so it's been really awesome to see that like the tools grow up, the processes grow up, the systems grow up, that now it's actually like, it's usable. It's a thing. It's an actual pipeline, I should say.
Yeah, no, it's come a very, very, very long way. Alex Bright online says Quartz Composer made some crashy QLab files over the years.
I believe that. I believe that.
So I had Lewis Kyle White on a few weeks ago, and he was talking a lot about his experiences with Max MXP. Yeah. And I would say Max MSP, and it's done I think that Max has actually done a really kind of good job in replacing a lot of the functionality that Quartz Composer
totally
had built into it. And it's just interesting to see, like, I still talk to people, and it's amazing how many times Quartz Composer still comes up in a conversation. And how many people still actually use Quartz Composer, which is pretty amazing all these years later.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I know this is like a pretty common question to some degree when dealing with real-time workflows, but what are, like, in your mind, what are the main advantages to having these real-time workflows? And actually to go that even further, like, how would you say that that's kind of created a niche for yourself and your business?
Yeah, so that's a big one. That's a big one. So the thing with moving real time for us came to this is, the thing about content is when you move content, traditional content, 2D, 3D animation, when you move from pre-rendered content to real time, you're really moving from content to an experience. And I think that's the really crazy thing, is that content goes from being just a flat thing on a flat screen to being a complete, like, almost, like this 4-dimensional experience almost. It like has space, it lives in time and place, it can have interaction, all of those different things, which I think is what's so exciting about real time. And the thing is, lack of rendering, great, that's awesome. But I think the bigger pros for us are, like, one, the fact that you can, like, it's instant, it's WYSIWYG, it's instant iteration, and what you see there is what you're going to get. And that's so hard especially 10 years ago as a motion designer, to like understand what you're creating and how it actually works. You know, the amount of previews you just had to go through to conceptualize, especially 3D work back then. You know, I like having to learn like Lightwave in school and having to just do everything in wireframes and just try to guess what your finals look like. That's gone. And that's a huge step. I think the other second thing is scalability, right? Like surfaces and what the surfaces are, whether it's a phone to a massive projection map thing, there's so much more scalability and dynamic in moving across formats. I think that's huge. Obviously, third is, you know, interactive. I think that's the given that we could go on and on about, of all sorts of interactive, from, you know, we're doing a lot now with data visualization to you do your artistic things that are just fun, touch, interactive, etc., the whole spectrum. And then I think the last thing is the client iteration and client change side. You know, one of the big projects we've done for many years is this project called Super Saturday Night with DirecTV, AT&T. And that is like the pinnacle of the real-time workflow, right? So what we do on that project is we're doing all these visuals for, what's really crazy is an 80,000 square foot temporary built 3-story venue for a Super Bowl party, right? That's already crazy. And then on top of that, there's all these visual experiences. There's tons of LED, tons of projection mapping, crazy projection structures, pixel mapping, plus some odd like 80 TVs. And we basically fuel all of that content entirely in real time. But where the process really goes a step further than just real-time audio reactive visuals, it's the fact that we can make on-site edits and changes. So my team is sitting there with AT&T's creative team looking at a 200-foot projection on the side of a building, and they're able a day before show to iterate, make changes, adjust the audio reactivity, do all of those things. And that is like, that's unthinkable when you go back 10, 15 years of, we obviously know the traditional workflow, which is, hey, I got your notes. I'm going to go interpret those. I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to render those. And then we'll look at it tomorrow night when it's dark because it's projection mapping. You know, the fact that that's out the window has been one of the biggest things I would say for us on so many projects, is that whole on-site edit, client editable type of concept. So I think all of that, and I think that kind of sums up like the niche side of how it's really benefited us, is we never went into real time telling clients like, hey, it's real time, it's real time. What we really try to do is go to clients and say, well, here's the idea you have, but what if we could add this extra layer to it? And that's how we started a path with a big client of ours called Drunk Elephant. They're the number one, real name.
Great name.
They're the number one skincare brand in North America. And we've been doing a ton of experiential in stuff with them. And it's really fun because it's such a different world, but they really like and embrace technology. And one of the first time we ever met them, they were like, can we do projection mapping? And then what we said is, well, what if we could do projection mapping and make it interactive? And that just like opened up this can of worms. And that's kind of what we look at with that niche. Yeah. Is when you can like put that cherry on top and really like blow their minds. That's awesome. But you're blowing their minds without changing their entire pipeline and how they work, because they understand how motion design works. They understand how you make graphics. So if you can work in that box and then add this other box to it, you're really kind of pushing them forward, because they're not having to rethink. They don't have to reconceptualize. You're building off of what they already know. And I think that's been like one of the most successful things for us, is working in that mindset versus just being like, throw out everything you already know and pick out this, because that works every time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's quite I mean, it would be interesting to also hear from the audience about how real-time technologies have affected your lives, and, you know, what you guys are working in now, and to see if you guys also agree to some of the things that we're talking about. I mean, I can't really see how you wouldn't, but, you know, to each in their own. You were talking earlier about I found this interesting about the concepts between motion design and real-time technologists and real-time technologies and how they are differentiated. Yeah. Could you actually elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that's a really interesting topic to speak about the audience that we have here.
So that's an interesting thing we learned in starting Meptic is when we first started, the team kind of had this split of we had motion design, and then we had like interactive technologists kind of in these two boats. And what's really fascinating is what we realized is like all the tools that are allowing you to do real time, the things we talked about, like your Max MSP, Quartz in a Day, your Touch Designer, Notch, Unreal, Unity, the whole spectrum of these real-time tools actually kind of sit in the middle. Is they're actually like partially creative, but partially technical, which is really fascinating. Is like, it takes a very different hybrid. It's, you don't just have like, Cinema 4D or After Effects, you have very creative people. And then you go into like even things more technical than Touch Designer, like code-based stuff like processing or something, you have very technical people. And so what we really kind of saw in that as a team is like, how do we actually pull that all together? And so it was really interesting. And it's been a really interesting journey of basically not seeing motion design and interactive technology and code even up here as these separate things. Is we basically just actually clump them all together. And really just think of the whole team as designers. We don't think of the team as like, you're a motion designer, you're this. And what's been really interesting in that process is as time's moved on, our design team has kind of all, I want to say, leveled out a little bit. Is everybody has different specialties, right? So one person might specialize in Cinema 4D and design, and one person might specialize in, code or backend or systems. But the thing is, they all have like fundamental threads that run through them. Like the whole team knows Notch. Some of the team knows Unreal and Unity. Some of the team knows, everybody knows After Effects. Some of the team knows Maya. Some know Cinema 4D. It's really this really interesting split thing. And so we've kind of just put it all together. And the way we kind of process it is kind of going to the team and saying, here's the objective. Let's hand that to you all. And then you all decide what tools make up the best approach. Is it Notch? Is it Cinema 4D this time? I don't know, but you guys figure out those pieces. So to your point, we've really tried to like not see these as very different disciplines. We've tried to put it all together so that everybody kind of thinks and learns from each other from technology and creative standpoints, because it's like I said, these tools are in the middle and it takes a bit of putting it all together. And so I see you, Berto.
I see you, Berto. Yeah, man. How can you not? And speaking about building all this together, hey, Berto, welcome to the show, man.
So it's kind of just been really cool in that sense of like, we've tried to pull all that together so that you kind of learn from every discipline and you share from every discipline, right? Because you might create something really cool in, Unity, but we might be trying to do data visualization. So what that means is we need somebody who knows how to make it look good, but somebody who knows how to parse all this data, right? Yep. And then you have to pull all that together. So it really takes a much more shared mindset than just, I'm a designer over here and I just create cool stuff. You have to be much more open to like how the process works and how to work with all sides of the equation.
I think that's a really interesting point to bring across, because like for me, working in product development and management, I also have to assess things from a psychological perspective and look at it from a user persona point of view and try and develop, user cases and basically how people work psychologically. And when you're looking at things, you've got very artistic people, but you've also got people that are very good in engineering or very good structurally. And those mindsets commonly are different. Like somebody that's got a really good systematic hold on things and does things in a systematic way might not have as fluid a thought process as like, or an abstract mind process as like an artist, who's kind of got that eye to be able to pull out those different little details when building things. So I think it's really good to have a good combination and a nice balance in that structure and in that team. Have you found any challenges in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been, I would say the biggest thing is it's a learning process, because none of this is existing workflow, right? How you do an entire show with 20 some odd different outputs of resolutions and things all in real time. There's not predetermined or pre-existing thought processes, 5 years ago, like about how you think about and conceptualize. And even so many of our projects involve usually some sort of like technical hurdle or something we're trying to understand, or something that hasn't been done, or something like that you're having to incorporate. And it's like I said, is, 5+ years ago when we started Meptic, there were, but there wasn't really like these job applications for real-time designers, right? Like, I feel like that's just changed in 5 years, that you now have people that are kind of starting to, I say, like, advertise or pitch themselves in that direction. It's been, 5 years ago, it's just like, I'm a 3D animator, 3D motion designer, 2D compositor. It was like very structured things that had a very existing pipeline. There's people who'd been in 5 years ago, there were still people who'd been in After Effects for almost 20 years at that point and stuff like that. So it's like, that I think has been one of the biggest things, is like, it's kind of like it's choose your own adventure, I guess, a bit is right now. It's like when you look at the big picture, we're still at, like, in my opinion, we're still at like the starting line.
I would say we're there too. I think we just kind of started to scratch the surface. And I love that actually Berto's watching, because, he was my first guest on my very first episode, which was incredible to have him. And I was very lucky to have him as a guest. But, there was a lot of stuff that we spoke about there during that episode where, he's been exploring a lot of gaming engine capabilities and been doing a lot of work in Unreal. But, up until a couple of years ago, I mean, even if it has been a couple of years, I guess it has been now, a lot of us, we were aware of Unreal and Unity, but we weren't really digging into it. And now, just in that short period of time, it's all over the place. It's completely like flooded the entire industry. And now everybody who is in real time is kind of diving into those tools and those engines. The same thing with Notch. I mean, just seeing how far Notch has come over the last few years, it's just been leaps and bounds, from where they are. So talking about tools, which ones are your kind of go-tos? I mean, you mentioned Notch, but have you guys been also working more heavily into Unreal and Unity, maybe even dabbling around coding some stuff of your own in any ways, or?
Yeah. So yes to all of the above. So with Notch and that kind of side of things, is I heard about Notch early on, before it was Notch, from guys I used to tour with, that were in back then in like 20, what was that? Maybe like 12, 13 or something. I'm fuzzy on dates, like around there, that I was working with these guys that kind of told me about it. So I knew when we started Meptic, like, hey, this thing's out there. And
the wild animal.
Exactly.
Nobody really truly knows exactly what it is.
And so we jumped into Notch pretty much from day one as a studio, doing projects in Notch. And, what I'll say to Notch, which has been pretty incredible, is like, I feel like, I think of it sometimes like that Quartz Composer, in terms of like how you can just jump in, put these nodes together, create some awesome stuff. But what Notch did that was really amazing, and this is kind of my opinion, is like, I think they really helped standardize real time in live event scenarios, which, like I said, you heard me say earlier, is like early on, it was so hacky, like how we had to like I did tours where we had extra Mac Pro cheese graters running with, Black Magic cards just to run like a single gimmick. You had like this whole thing set up, and you would do it, and you would just cross your fingers every night and hope that one box would like just make it through that one song or something. Like that was totally a thing back then.
Oh,
and I think
you remember the days of catalysts and catalysts. And all kinds of different stuff, feeding one thing, feeding another, and RTRs and like a lot of analog stuff mixing with digital, and you just really hoped to God it was going to work.
That you're reminding me of a whole separate story, which is I did a whole tour where we actually used a Catalyst machine as the entire video switcher, and we like took 7 SDI sources in, which nearly killed the machine back then. Yeah, and like we built an entire Tally interface with Arduinos. This is 2010, 11. And like we did this whole tour with Catalyst and this whole thing. But again, it was like still very like I said, we hacked Arduino parts together and did all this stuff. And so to answer the question is like, yeah, Notch has been a huge one. And Notch is what really started the path for us to move all of our motion design work over. So that's where we started, is moving everything. And when I say everything, like I said, it's 90 to 100% of our work has been a ton in Notch. And then obviously nowadays, like everybody else, it's been so much in Unreal, Unity for so many things. And the kind of spectrum of use of how I look at it in the different sides is basically, on one side you have, say, like After Effects and Cinema 4D. And what those are really great for, despite being pre-rendered, is you can get into those programs and just iterate an idea so quickly. Like, you can go into Cinema and build this amazing design from absolutely nothing. No pre-existing assets, no pre-existing models, anything. You can just build this design, crank it out.
You start with a square, or even better, you start with a teapot and you go from there.
Right. And then on the other end of the spectrum, how we've looked at it is you have like Unity and Unreal, and you do have creation tools. But the way we look at the workflow and pipeline is like when you go into an Unreal to a game engine, you have to have a bit more of a plan. It's not, like I said, compared to Cinema, it's not a tool that you go in and just say, let me take all these cubes and then iterate out a design and a world in this ideation process. So
you don't Minecraft it.
Yeah. And the way we see it is that spectrum is kind of Notches are in the middle. Is Notch allows us to like ideate really quickly. And it also touches into, game development, that kind of side of things. And so we kind of look at it as this spectrum of, in that spectrum, what are we trying to do and what are we trying to accomplish? And it's that point of, what tool is going to do the best thing for us. Outside of that, we get into
touched on that as well in the comments.
Right. And so totally agree with you there. And that's what we say all the time is like, that's why I said we kind of really let the team kind of decide on direction, tools, etc. And, other things and programs we do. Yeah, we're working on a ton of other stuff. One of my side passions is Node-RED, which is open source.
Yep.
It's like internet.
Very, very popular one these days.
I keep a Node-RED server running in my closet of my house that does all sorts of silly things, but I love it. I love it because it's not only is it open source, it runs in a web browser, but it's like this amazing tool it has a huge following in the Internet of Things community. So this is what's amazing is like you can develop your own nodes. It's all node based, but people have developed nodes that are like a Nest thermostat, a Philips Hue bulb. And then you can literally take over here like OSC, ArtNet, and have that trigger your Nest thermostat. Like that's completely useful to me in some way, but like, but it's been really fun because I've built like media server control dashboards and data visualization boards. It's kind of like a fun hobby to me, but it's really great because it's so low power. Like it's running on a Raspberry Pi Model 2 in my closet for like a year and a half now. and you can do all sorts of just fun stuff with that. So we do quite a bit with Node-RED because it's really good at parsing like database stuff. It doesn't do visuals, but you can for instance, I have one running that pings MARTA, our train service. It pings their API, and then I can visualize all the trains at the train station near my house right here. So I can see like when trains are coming and stuff. But the cool thing is you can then take that data and pipe that into a Notch, Unreal, Unity, whatever you want, and do visualizations with it, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You got my brain spinning because I think that one of the interesting parts about where we are now is we're getting all these great software tools, but now a lot of the Internet of Things technologies, I think I'm seeing kind of make their way into our industry more and more every single day. I think tools like Node-RED and web-based technologies are really also pushing their way in. What are your thoughts on kind of some of the stuff coming down the pipes, especially on the web-based side and web-based tools? Are you guys looking at working with anything along those lines? Are you guys working, with any cloud-based apps or things like that have benefited you?
Yeah. So I think the first thought to that is everything's just blurring together, right? So like these very distinct disciplines are now all just like melding. And to your point, like, DIY, the DIY movement, that kind of IoT technology is completely applicable to our world these days of, what I just said, a Raspberry Pi that people use them on shows and to do things, and Arduinos and all that technology is like, totally blurring together. In terms of where it's all going, I think it's a few things. I think one, everything is going cloud-based. I've been saying that for quite some time, is like all of this technology we use is going to be all about, cloud networking, IP, IT stuff. And when people used to ask me 5 years ago, what's the future? If I want to be in video and video technology, what do I need to know in the future? And my response is always two things: code and networking. Like those are literally the two biggest skills. And I think it's super true is like with code, the thing is you can create the tools, right? That's the key thing is when you actually write the lines, you have control to build the things that you need. Otherwise, you're always having to work within the constraints. And those constraints aren't bad. Those constraints have gone us very, very far. But you still have this possibility of like, if you can jump in there and write just a few lines of code, you can really extend your reach of what's possible so much. I think just in that sense, but then like everything is networking, and this is like in the media server, playback systems world, now everything is going to IP-based video. And now with the current state of where things are at, everybody's working remotely, which is even further just expediting that process of everything being in the cloud and everything being based around networking. Is, I've been a huge fan for a long time of like the NDI protocol, using open source video over IP.
No, NDI is awesome.
Yeah, I've been using it for years now in all sorts of different scenarios and cases and things, because it's like, this is brilliant. Is, now everything's based around a cat cable. It's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the main things. Is further expediting of cloud workflows is only going to be exasperated now. Like it's just going to move forward at a more rapid pace, because this time has shown us like how much we benefit from that. So I think furthering my thought process is like, it's only a matter of time before our media servers, our render engines are literally entirely in the cloud, streaming down to 100 feet of LED wall. That's not going to become a crazy possibility when, many of us have probably worked on shows where like you have massive fiber, backbones or infrastructure, you have tons of bandwidth, dark fiber to get content into an arena.
I mean, when you really look at it, like the satellite trucks, they've been around for a long time, and there's been tons of bandwidth in those. Right,
exactly. I think that's the thing is, not only is the technology getting better, the other thing is like the desegregation of the industry is like, how the cost and barrier to entry is, getting better. The tools are getting more affordable.
So much lower now. I mean,
which is huge.
Yeah. We've been talking about, things that people could do at home and, going online and grabbing, a Vive tracker and a couple of basically IR cameras and stuff. It's just gotten so affordable now where you just did not have the access to be able to do that financially, up until just this last couple of years.
Totally.
So Nick, driving into kind of these kind of future technologies and future ideas, where do you see Meptic kind of moving into the future, and what are you guys excited about? What your focus is on?
Oh, my biggest focus right now is making it to 2021.
I think that's
my number one future goal. No, I kid. What am I really excited about? Gosh, I think so many things. I think the standardization of virtual production is such a fascinating. It's been a fascinating thought, and now seeing that workflow is expedited, and I know Berto, about that, talked about that, is like that side of things is
been there, done that. So passe.
And so seeing that standardized is really exciting. But I think what's really exciting is seeing that, seeing real-time virtual production, cloud-based systems, seeing that expedited, it seems like a trend right now, but it's actually going to chart the course for our future for people in this industry so much. Here's crazy thoughts to just throw out and think about is right now you do a Monday Night Football and you have all these TV trucks and you have all these people in the trucks and whatever. Well, right now we're proving that these broadcasts can all happen remotely. The Chiron operator could be over here, the director can be over there, etc. And if cloud workflows expedite, it's not that crazy to think that in 25 years, there's no truck on site. The whole crew.
In 25 years.
And that's the thing. I think it'll be much quicker than that because we're just expediting on these exponential curves, right? Is that's pretty exciting to me to think about. Is we already know this is the future, is that your basically laptop is just a portal into a cloud farm somewhere. Like I was saying, that's only going to become a thing more and more and more and more as time goes on. And so I think that's really exciting to just see that we've hit this point that now the rate of adoption is taken off. And I think what's really fascinating about this time is that it's caused us to realize innovation a bit. It's so easy as a society, as people, to get set in our ways and just do, a small iteration of the same thing. This has caused us to make leaps and bounds, jumps in what the technology will let us do and how far we can push it. And I think what's so awesome about that is we just went from baby steps to this giant step. And, now we're so much further along, and that's only going to push us forward in all of this technology. So I think that's one of the things I think I'm really excited about, is just how that's going to allow the next wave of iteration, collaboration, etc. Is things are at that point are just going to become global. You can then do a Monday Night Football and your CG operators in the UK, your content teams in Australia, your directors in Vancouver. That's pretty crazy to think about that could be a reality sooner than we think. Is that it's technically already happening. Right.
I mean, the performance from Katy Perry, I know, was a collaborative effort to put together, and there were people from all kinds of different continents, working on that project to make that come together, and they were working on it live. Yeah. So the technology, I believe, is here, and it's still in its infancy stages, and there's a lot of challenges ahead in working out those bottlenecks and working out those workflows. But yeah, I think that we are definitely moving into a different era or a different time for these technologies and for what we are pushing forward in trying to do.
Yeah.
So Nick, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on board, and for all the viewers tuning in, thank you guys again so much for all of your support. This has been an awesome adventure and journey for me, and definitely for the guests, I hope, as well, that have tuned in. If you guys would like to learn more about Nick and his company, please reach out to him at meptic.com. And Nick, do you have any other contact info that you want to share?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram. It's my full name, Nicholas Rivero. Other than that, I stay pretty quiet on the internets these days. So yeah, you can find me there, find me through our site and whatnot.
Awesome. And also next week, we've got Matthew Reagan, who's coming on from Pseudo Magic. So that's going to be a really cool, interesting conversation. And I also wanted to do this as a little bit of a precursor up to another convention that's coming up called Framework. For those of you who are not aware of Framework, it's a new convention that's being formed and a new community that's being formed around real-time video. So I would heavily encourage you to check out framework-community.com and check out their upcoming conference. Nick is actually slotted to be one of the speakers there. And so is Matthew Reagan next week. So, and I also might have a couple of little secrets coming up as well, kind of moving towards that next week. Maybe a couple of other little announcements and guests before the show next week. So, Nick, we're going to continue on our conversation, kind of open it up a little bit more. For those of you viewing, if you guys have any questions you'd like to ask us, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Nick directly, please feel free to post them in the comments, and we're going to get around to them now. Otherwise, we're going to just kind of keep this super cash. I can't believe I did that, but keep it pretty casual. And
you can edit it out in post.
Pardon?
You can edit it out in post later.
Nah, I'll leave it in. It's fine. Kind of shows my, a little bit of my quirky side. But dude, AR, XR stuff. Have you guys been working a lot in XR?
Oh yeah. Quite a bit going on there, just to say the least.
Pardon?
Yeah. Quite a bit going on there, I would say, in the least. So we've been focusing quite a few efforts in a bunch of different stuff there. And with the technology, I'll say this is like the big question we're asking right now is as a studio, whenever we look at technology like AR, XR, MR, etc., we kind of look at like, okay, what's the face value stuff that you can do with this? Then the immediate next question we have is, okay, what else? We always ask this what else question around, okay, what can we apply this to? And so, we've been doing quite a bit in that space, and we actually have a fun project coming up I can't mention yet in 2 weeks. That's pretty fun in the space of trying to kind of explore that what else question is like, what else can we do with this technology? And I think that's the thing that like excites me about it is like there's so many use cases of not just concerts and shows and corporate. There's so many other things. And that was like, so many years ago, like the cool thing to me was like how Pokemon Go really like standardized the idea of AR, augmenting your everyday life. And I think that's the thing with all this technology that's so fascinating is it's one of those things where I think we're just like at the tip of the iceberg for what's to come in like the grand scheme of all of this tech is, it's going to be so different in, again, 10 years where this tech seems very new and crazy now, but it's going to be like 25 years from now, when my daughter's grown, it's going to be like,
oh man,
normal.
Can't imagine what it's going to be like in 25 years. Like I'm excited to see what it's going to be like in 25 years and terrified at the same time.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What about AR? Have you guys been have you guys been experimenting or playing with any applications or anything in an AR space?
Yeah, we've been doing a bit for us in the experiential space. So, being able to do trade show booths and pop-up stores and smaller events and different things like that, where we've been like trying to find interesting use cases and different things. In the way I would put it is like, the way we see it, I guess, is like all of this is part of like the real-time pipeline. It's all part of the spectrum of like this real-time production, right? You have motion design, you have interactive stuff, you have AR, XR, whatever the spectrum is, and it's kind of all very shared in terms of like pipeline. So yeah, we're working in all of it, playing with all of it. It was a bummer because we had some fun projects on the map, of course, that got derailed. We were literally like, I can't really say, but we were literally 7 days out from like this awesome like XR AR project, and then of course everything got canceled, which was a bummer. But we're just like, now especially what we're looking at is how do you use all that technology to benefit people that can't be in the same room with you, right? That's what everybody's asking is what can this technology do to not just literally augment or extend that experience, but to really create deeper connections, right? Because that's really the crux of all of what we do is like, how do you build deeper connections with people through technology, right? I think that's what...
That is like, I think we need to like sound the loudspeaker on that and state that to everybody, because that, I believe, is the most fundamental part. And I think something that a lot of people really truly overlook. I would honestly say that is one of the biggest and most challenging parts, I think, with a lot of people that that work in some of the different market segments, having the understanding that, these stories are being told not only to portray messages, but to also bring people closer together.
Oh, yeah.
And telling stories through technology is really what it's about.
Totally. I mean, that's the big thing of like with like technology and all of it. And this is a bigger, thing, is like, it's so easy to either push people away or bring people further in, into whatever it is you're doing, your experience, your idea, your brand. And that's what we always try to figure out is like, how does technology create those deeper human experiences? That's the thing is like, I think that's the thing we're all looking towards in some way, shape, or form. And the thing we just continually think about is like, how do you bring people joy in those moments? How do you bring lasting impressions? What do you do? And how does our tech help people leave with like that unforgettable memory type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was one of the main reasons why I decided to do these mainly live instead of pre-recorded, so that we can have these deeper connections and these conversations and engage with the people that are also watching. And I just think that it's just so important to have that connection because it makes it more intimate and it makes it more engaging.
Totally.
So it just, it's just something that it's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do right. And I think that, especially when we're talking about experiential design and starting to get into the experiential markets, that's one of the biggest challenges. Tim say I'm engaged. We're engaged too, buddy. We're glad you are too.
Well, I think it brings up an interesting point, and this is obviously delving away from like real time. Is we've been processing as a studio for a long time. Is we've been in the experiential economy, right? And so we've been processing like, what does the post-experiential world look like? And what's crazy is I don't think any of us ever thought that we would be realizing the post-experiential world now, right? Everybody thought like, oh, it's a couple years out, we'll start to graduate into this. And so now it's really like, that's the thing, is how do we continue to connect as a society without being connected, right? Like that's the big thing right now that we're like all having to process. And it's going to, I feel like, chart such a trajectory moving forward. Is my overall hope is that this actually teaches us to come more together and teaches us how to use technology to embrace each other, connect with each other, push each other forward, on and on and on. But I think it's going to make us value the experiences so much more when we get back to them. But I think in this time, it's like, that's what our job needs to be, is how do we help that? How do we push that forward?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you anymore. And I mean, that's kind of one of the core pieces of having the kind of business that you also have, right? Is to speak to clients and talk to them and educate them on how these technologies are going to help portray the messages and the conversations that they're trying to have, either with the people that work within their companies or the people that they're trying to reach out to in their customer base.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, with a few minutes left, like asking everybody else and even asking you, is like, what do you guys think is next? You know, what do you think's the next evolution in the technology and where we go and how we help that?
That's a really good question. And if you're going to ask me that question, I would say it's going to be a combination of a few different things. You know, the way that I look at it, I think that a lot of the action that's taking place in virtual reality right now is really starting to come around. There's a lot of different companies that are really honing and being focused on creating digital or virtual environments that we can be in. I think, yeah, more accessible AR technology, without a doubt. But, you know, seeing a lot of things like Fortnite, for example, was a really good example of having a huge community of people using technology that are not, you know, they are engaging in certain ways, but they're also within an environment that they can interact. Yeah, Berto's actually said it right. Smart interaction. So for me, I find that it's kind of going to be a mix, you know, and I've been kind of saying that a lot of the ways that we've done events are now becoming pretty interesting, because I think you can really start to pull some of these technologies together and have even smaller, more intimate concerts or even settings for events, but still have a huge audience base that's there.
Yeah.
So you can create different environments and different feelings by using technology a little bit smarter.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's a big one, to your point, Berto, down there, is like, you know, more intelligent interactions is definitely going to be a thing. Like with real-time technology, you know, the big discussion that gets asked a ton of times is AI, and how is AI integrated, and how do systems learn and understand your interactions, that your interactions aren't just passive, you know, they actually mean things and they actually connect to things and think through things. And I totally think that's a, you know,
I think AI is going to pertain a lot to this comment from Berto, which is making real-time data smarter.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the areas that AI is really going to help be able to help kind of take care of that data.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That I think it's really such a big piece of, like, you know, where we go. And I think what we're going to see is that AI, and not only that, but automation. Like, you know, we as a studio have so many internal processes that are based around automation. So it's like just the idea that really simple things like, you know, for instance, it's like all my calendar meetings and everything get published into a custom Slack channel. Like, it can be that simple, but it makes my life that much more connected. I think we're only going to see hyper extensions of that in our shows and in the technology we use on our shows. Having real-time tools that start to think ahead for us, that kind of think of the outcomes or think of the scenarios, things that can automate. Think about the day when, like, a few years from now, an entire set of servers for a show just sets itself up. It's not that crazy.
It's really not. It's really, really not, especially with these days and the parameters and the things that you can do. You see a lot of people that are scripting things now and using scripting engines and things to be able to automate those processes. But yeah, I can definitely see a world where in the near future where AI will be able to basically, you'll be able to put in a few different parameters and say, hey, I kind of want to do this. And it goes, okay, cool, no problem.
Exactly.
Walk you through a little prompt and give you some questions, yes or no. Yeah, this would be good.
Yeah.
This is good. Nope, don't want that. Don't want that. Don't want that. And boom, done. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, super cool. Well, Nick, man, I think we've hit our time, but thank you so much again for coming on board. Guys, thank you as well, my viewers, for coming in and checking things out. And it's just been absolutely incredible. Again, if you want to check out Nick and get some more information from Nick, please check his website out at meptic.com. And as I say every single week to you guys, stay ahead of the curve. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thanks.